Imagine walking into a grass-walled conference room on the top floor of a midtown Manhattan office. Your palms are slightly damp. You just spent 45 minutes in the subway staring at a cracked screen, chugging a lukewarm Starbucks cold brew, and reviewing a deck that your cross-functional team spent 3 weeks building. Across the table sits a senior vice president who controls a budget larger than the gross domestic product of a small island nation. They do not look up from their phone when you enter. They are currently clearing their inbox, firing off Slack messages to their direct reports, and deciding whether your presence is a valuable use of their next 15 minutes or a complete waste of time. Most people in this exact scenario make a fatal mistake before they even clear their throat to speak. They assume the battle is won or lost based on the data on slide 4. They think their metrics will save them. They believe human beings are rational economic actors who make decisions based on spreadsheet cells and profit margins. The data says otherwise. Your data is irrelevant if your behavioral algorithm is broken. Human beings are not spreadsheets. We are deeply insecure, pattern-recognizing mammals driven by primitive biological software that was hardwired into our DNA long before anyone invented open-plan offices or quarterly performance reviews. In the first 3 seconds of that interaction, that vice president's nervous system scanned your posture, your micro-expressions, and the precise velocity of your movement. They did not do this consciously. Their brain ran a background script that instantly assigned you a social value score. If that score is low, every single piece of data you present will be filtered through a lens of skepticism. You could offer them a strategy that guarantees a 10-fold return on investment, and they will still find a reason to push it back to Q4. This is the hidden tax of poor social engineering. It is an invisible levy paid daily by brilliant operators who wonder why their less competent peers keep getting promoted over them. The corporate world is filled with highly technical individuals who build incredible systems but remain completely illiterate in the foundational language of human connection. They spend thousands of dollars on coding boot camps, executive MBAs, and SaaS subscriptions, yet they communicate with the nuance of an automated email bot. They rely on sheer willpower and raw intellect to force their way through professional bottlenecks. Relying on raw willpower to navigate complex social hierarchies without understanding behavioral algorithms is like trying to hold your breath underwater while running a marathon. The physics of the system will defeat you every single time. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the concept of cognitive load. Your brain is a biological battery with a finite amount of processing power per day. Every single decision you make, from choosing between an almond croissant or an egg white bite at Dunkin' to deciding how to word a sensitive email to a client, drains that battery. When an executive or a prospective customer interacts with you, their brain is actively trying to conserve its own energy. If your presentation, your body language, or your conversational flow feels clunky, disorganized, or erratic, you are forcing their brain to work harder than it wants to. You are creating cognitive friction. When friction increases, the human organism instinctively withdraws. They check out. They look at their watch. They mention a hard stop at the top of the hour and tell you to drop the rest of the details into a brief document for later review. The secret to complete social dominance is not about memorizing a massive list of generic conversation starters or faking a high-energy personality. Faking enthusiasm is a low-status behavior that immediately triggers a defense mechanism in high-value individuals. It smells like a sales pitch. It looks like compliance. True authority is quiet, deliberate, and highly structured. It relies on the deliberate removal of social noise. Look at the way a premier venture capitalist behaves during a pitch meeting, or how a top-tier founder conducts an all-hands call on Zoom. They do not fidget. They do not rush to fill every pocket of silence with meaningless verbal filler like totally, absolutely, or 100%. They treat their words, their movements, and their attention as a premium currency that must be allocated with extreme precision.
Let us break down the exact operational blueprints required to reprogram your daily interactions, starting with the somatic architecture of your presence. Most individuals walk through their office building or stand in line at a local coffee shop completely detached from their physical frame. They're hunched forward, eyes locked onto a smartphone screen, shoulders rolled inward in a defensive posture that signals a complete lack of environmental awareness. This is a low-status stance that invites people to overlook you. To fix this, you need an automated physical reset mechanism that runs in the background of your daily routine. Every single time you walk through a doorway, whether it's the entrance to your office lobby, the door to the break room, or even the bathroom, use that physical threshold as a trigger to execute a three-step somatic alignment. First, expand your chest slightly to create maximum physical distance between your collarbones. This simple adjustment forces your shoulders back without making you look stiff or unnatural. Second, drop your weight entirely into the heels of your feet, stabilizing your core and eliminating the nervous swaying that plagues most public speakers. Third, fix your gaze parallel to the horizon, looking directly at the throat level of the people around you rather than down at the carpet. This is not about trying to look intimidating, it's about presenting a physical frame that occupies its space with zero anxiety. When you hold your body with this specific baseline stability, your own internal chemistry responds. Your cortisol levels dip, your voice drops into a lower, more resonant register, and your brain stops treating the environment as a threat zone. Once you've stabilized the physical frame, you must address the precise timing of your warmth. The average corporate employee operates with a default compliance loop. When they meet someone higher up the organizational chart, they immediately flash a fast, eager smile and unleash a torrent of rapid-fire pleasantries. This is a massive mistake. A fast, automatic smile signals that your approval is cheap. It implies that you distribute your warmth indiscriminately to anyone who crosses your path, which immediately reduces its perceived value. Instead, when you make initial contact with a colleague, a client, or a stakeholder, maintain a neutral, completely focused expression for a deliberate beat. Look them directly in the eyes. Take half a second to anchor your attention fully on their presence. Only after that brief pause should you allow a genuine, controlled smile to develop. This slight delay changes the entire psychological dynamic of the interaction. It communicates to the other person's subconscious that your warmth is not a robotic reflex. It is a specific piece of recognition that they earned.
This structural control over your attention must extend to your visual mechanics. In an era dominated by rapid notifications, shifting browser tabs, and short attention spans, deep focus has become an incredibly rare and highly valuable resource. Most people glance, nod, blink, and shift their eyes across the room every 3 seconds during a conversation. They are looking at their laptops, checking their smartwatches, or tracking who else just walked into the room. This erratic visual behavior signals high anxiety and low status. If you want to establish an immediate sense of authority, you must practice visual tracking. When someone is speaking to you, lock your eyes onto theirs and do not break that contact the exact millisecond they finish their sentence. Hold their gaze for a deliberate second longer, even after the room falls silent. When you finally do choose to look away, do not snap your head to the side like you just got caught stealing a glance. Let your eyes drift away slowly and smoothly, as if you are deliberately transitioning your attention to the next logical point in the room. This tells the other person that you are entirely grounded in the moment and completely untroubled by the social pressure of the interaction. However, you must understand the operational limits of this visual system. If you maintain unblinking, aggressive eye contact with someone who has demonstrated zero mutual interest or who feels inherently threatened by your presence, your behavior transitions from charismatic to completely socially illiterate. It triggers a threat response rather than a connection loop. To utilize this effectively without creating unnecessary friction, implement the split focus framework. Maintain steady, relaxed eye contact while the person is actively communicating their core point. The moment they conclude their statement, let your gaze drop slightly to their hands or to the notebook on the table as you process their input. Then bring your eyes back up to lock onto theirs as you deliver your response. This creates a natural, rhythmic modulation of tension that keeps the conversation engaging without ever becoming awkward or confrontational. When the interaction transitions from nonverbal cues to actual spoken words, the primary goal shifts from establishing status to eliminating conversational dead ends. The single greatest killer of workplace rapport is the naked response. Imagine standing near the office espresso machine. A director from another department asks you a standard, low-stakes question to break the ice. Where did you base yourself before moving to the New York office? The average employee answers with a single, unadorned noun, Chicago. Silence immediately floods the space. The director now has to do extra cognitive heavy lifting to keep the interaction alive. They have to invent a follow-up question, ask about the weather in the Midwest, or awkwardly check their phone. You have essentially created a bad user experience for their brain. To fix this forever, you must always dress your responses with contextual bait. Never drop a raw fact without attaching a secondary hook that the other person can easily grab onto. If they ask where you are from, your answer should be structured with an embedded narrative hook. You say you just relocated from Chicago, specifically from the West Loop area, right when the tech scene started taking over the old industrial warehouses. Look at what you just did. You did not just answer their question, you handed them 3 distinct conversational handles. They can ask about the Chicago tech landscape, comment on real estate trends, or talk about food spots in the West Loop. You have drastically reduced the cognitive load required to talk to you. You have made the exchange completely frictionless. This exact same rule applies to the way you articulate your professional identity. When an online entrepreneur or a corporate professional is asked what they do for a living, 99% of them default to their standard human resources job title. I am a senior system administrator, or I run an agency. These words mean absolutely nothing to anyone outside your specific niche. They are generic labels that carry zero emotional weight or practical interest. To fix this, you must permanently delete your job title from your casual vocabulary and replace it with a single-sentence value proposition. This sentence must clearly state who you serve, the exact bottleneck you eliminate, and the tangible outcome you deliver. If you are a software developer, do not say you write code. Say you build the back-end architecture that allows fast-growing e-commerce brands to process millions in transactions without their checkout page crashing on Black Friday. Suddenly, you are no longer a line-item expense or a generic employee. You are an engineer of specific solutions. You have planted a seed of massive curiosity, and the other person will almost always ask how exactly you managed to pull that off. When you are the one responsible for facilitating connections between others, such as introducing 2 colleagues at a networking mixer or looping a new vendor into a cross-functional project call, you must abandon the lazy introduction framework. Simply saying, "Alex, this is Sarah," is a complete failure of social engineering. It leaves both parties standing in an awkward vacuum, forcing them to execute the tedious baseline small talk that everyone secretly detests. A high-value operator never introduces people without providing immediate common ground. You must provide a contextual bridge that links their relative strengths or shared projects. You state that Alex is the lead strategist who optimized the entire email automation pipeline for the Q1 launch, and Sarah is the principal designer whose creative assets just drove a 40% increase in conversion rates on the new landing pages. By doing this, you have instantly bypassed 20 minutes of meaningless conversational fluff. You have set them up to immediately discuss high-level execution, and both individuals will respect you for facilitating a highly efficient interaction. When the interaction transitions from nonverbal cues to actual spoken words, the primary goal shifts from establishing status to eliminating conversational dead ends. Most individuals participate in conversations purely to share their own thoughts. While the other person is speaking, their internal monologue is busy preparing their next story, their next joke, or their own related achievement. They are completely blind to the verbal data points being dropped right in front of them.
High-performance communication requires you to operate like an analyst tracking data patterns. Listen for the specific offhand remarks that people let slip when they're talking about their week, references to a midnight deployment that kept them up, a family trip to Austin they're planning, or a new operational framework they're trying to implement in their small business. These are not random details. These are explicit map coordinates indicating exactly what that person cares about in that precise moment. When you pick up one of these clues and deliberately circle back to it, asking them to elaborate on the challenges of that deployment or what inspired the trip, you are putting the spotlight entirely on their world. You are demonstrating a level of presence that is exceptionally rare in a distracted corporate environment.
If a conversation does hit a complete structural dead end and an awkward silence sets in, you do not need to scramble to invent an entirely new topic from scratch. You can utilize a highly reliable mechanical rescue loop known as conversational echo. This involves simply taking the last 3 words or the core phrase of their previous statement and repeating it back to them with an inquiring upward inflection. Imagine a client says they had an incredibly stressful week because the logistics team completely mismanaged the fulfillment side of the business. You simply respond with a measured tone, "Mismanage the fulfillment side?" The client will instinctively lean in and unpack the entire story. They will elaborate on the specific vendor delays, the software bugs, and the operational headaches they experienced. Why does this work? Because it provides a powerful psychological green light that validates what they just said without requiring you to introduce any new cognitive load into the mix. You are keeping the conversational energy moving using their own fuel. When a dialogue is flowing smoothly, you can actively manipulate the level of rapport by adjusting your linguistic framework to align with their dominant cognitive processing style. Every individual filters reality through a specific primary sensory lens. Some people are highly visual. They think in terms of frameworks, blueprints, and clear pictures. Others are primarily auditory. They focus on how things sound, the overall rhythm of a project, or getting everyone in sync. A third group is deeply kinesthetic. They need to get a handle on a problem, feel out a physical workflow, or make sure a strategy lands solidly. Pay close attention to the specific verbs and idioms that your counterpart defaults to during a meeting. If an executive says they want to see the overall vision for the project, do not respond by saying "that sounds good to you." That is an auditory response to a visual cue, which creates a subtle subconscious disconnect in their brain. Instead, match their sensory track exactly. Say that the vision looks entirely clear and that you have designed a roadmap that maps out every major milestone. When you mirror their dominant sensory language, their brain experiences a profound sense of cognitive alignment. They will feel like you completely understand their thinking, even if the actual data you are discussing is highly complex. You can accelerate this sense of alignment by intentionally shifting your pronouns from the individual to the collective early in the life cycle of a professional relationship. Poor communicators default to defensive, isolated language. "This is what I can do from my end, and then you can review it from your end." This creates an immediate psychological barrier that positions the two of you as opposing actors on a chessboard. High-status operators utilize the team pronoun shift as soon as a baseline level of mutual interest is established. Even if you met a potential vendor or client 15 minutes ago, begin framing the discussion around the word "we." Say that once we iron out the bottleneck in the onboarding sequence, we can scale the customer acquisition framework across the remaining channels. This simple linguistic adjustment completely reconfigures the psychological dynamic. It subtly forces their brain to view you not as an external solicitor or an isolated employee, but as an active teammate who is already embedded in their operational world. To take this a step further, you can manufacture a shared historical reference on the spot, creating a strong sense of insider status within minutes. This is done by identifying a unique immediate environmental factor that both of you are experiencing in real time and calling it out as a shared reality.
If you are attending a poorly organized corporate seminar where the audio system is constantly emitting a loud hum and the catering consists of stale bagels, do not pretend everything is fine. Lean over slightly and state that it feels like the two of you are participating in a psychological endurance test designed by the Human Resources Department. This shared observation creates an instant, low-stakes insider choke. It separates the two of you from the general mass of the crowd and builds a small, functional alliance based on mutual perception. When you follow up with that person by email or LinkedIn a week later, you can reference that specific moment in your opening line, instantly bypassing the cold, formal barriers that typically stall professional networking. As you master these alignment systems, you must also learn how to deploy praise without destroying your professional authority. Most corporate professionals utilize compliments as a crude tool for social alignment. They walk up to a superior and shower them with direct, exaggerated flattery. "That presentation was absolutely incredible. You are such an amazing leader." This behavior is incredibly destructive to your status. It positions you as a clear subordinate who is desperately seeking validation from a dominant figure. Valuable praise must always be delivered with extreme structural care. The most effective way to praise a high-ranking individual or a valuable peer is to let that praise reach them through an indirect delivery route. Praise them behind their back to a mutual colleague, knowing with absolute certainty that the statement will eventually be repeated to them. When someone hears that you spoke highly of their operational execution when they weren't even in the room to hear it, the compliment carries 10 times more psychological weight. It completely eliminates the suspicion of manipulation. It proves that your admiration is authentic and entirely unattached to an immediate request for a favor.
If you are the one who actively catches a piece of positive feedback rolling through the office grapevine, you must act as a value delivery vehicle. If you hear a director mention that a junior analyst completely crushed the data modeling for a recent client pitch, do not let that information die in your inbox. Walk over to that analyst or send them a precise, asynchronous message. State that you overheard the director specifically highlighting the precision of their data models during the leadership sync. By becoming the person who systematically delivers unearned good news throughout your organization, you build an immense amount of social capital. People will instinctively associate your presence with validation, status elevation, and psychological safety. You become a highly trusted node in the corporate network simply by routing existing value to the right coordinates. When you do choose to deliver a compliment directly, you must ensure it is structured as an assumption of baseline excellence rather than a shock response. Avoid saying things like, "Wow, you did a surprisingly good job on that project report." That phrasing implies that your default expectation was failure or mediocrity, which is an insulting position to take. Instead, frame your praise around their established habit of high performance. State that the precision of the report was exactly what you expected, given their track record for managing complex data streams. This shifts the compliment from a shallow piece of flattery into a deep validation of their professional identity. It tells them that you recognize their baseline operational standards and hold them to a high, elite benchmark. To truly anchor your place in someone's memory, you must learn to identify the exact quality that sits at the very core of their self-image and praise that specific attribute. Every single ambitious professional carries an internal picture of who they are and what they want to be remembered for. A founder might pride themselves on their sheer resilience under pressure. A lead designer might base their entire identity on their radical attention to detail. An operations manager might view themselves as the invisible glue that holds a chaotic system together. If you praise a designer merely for being fast, you are missing their true identity. You must find a quiet moment at the conclusion of a project or during an off-site dinner to deliver a highly specific piece of recognition. Look them in the eyes, use their name, and tell them that the subtle alignment of the user interface on the checkout sequence completely transformed the user experience, proving that they see things 99% of people completely overlook.
This is a rare, deep validation that they will remember for years because it proves that you are actually capable of seeing them for who they truly are. This same standard of structural control must be maintained when you are communicating across audio channels where your physical frame is completely invisible. The moment you transition to a standard phone call or an asynchronous audio snippet on Slack, your voice inherits the entire burden of your social engineering. The average professional handles phone calls with a flat, low-energy monotony or a rushed, anxious pacing that completely drains their authority. When you're on a call, you must consciously treat your voice as a precision instrument. Smile slightly while you are articulating your thoughts, even if the other person cannot see your face. The mechanical shift in your jaw directly alters the acoustic resonance of your vocal cords, making your tone sound warmer, more engaging, and inherently more confident. Use deliberate pauses to punctuate your core points rather than rushing through your sentences to prevent an interruption. A high-status voice is never hurried. It commands its space on the line with absolute structural composure. You must also master the mechanics of telephone gatekeeping, particularly when you are operating in a position where you need to manage access to a high-value executive or protect your own deep work schedule. When someone calls your line asking for an immediate transfer to a decision maker, never respond with a cold, abrupt refusal like, "They're busy, who is this?" This approach immediately creates a confrontational dynamic and signals a complete lack of organizational polish. Instead, implement a strategic soft screen. Respond with absolute warmth and compliance. "I would be more than happy to get you connected right away. Let me check their calendar availability real quick. May I let them know who is calling and the specific project this is regarding?" This phrasing completely disarms the caller. It frames your screening process as a helpful service rather than an administrative roadblock. If you need to refuse the transfer, you can then transition smoothly into a protective hold. "It looks like they're currently locked into an executive review session until 4. Let me take down your exact coordinates so I can have them follow up once they're clear." Before you ever initiate an outbound call or dive straight into a complex professional agenda during an unscheduled interaction, you must check the operational state of the person on the other end. Do not simply launch into a 5-minute pitch the second they pick up the phone. Start with a direct, respectful check-in on their current capacity. Ask if they are currently clear to discuss the project metrics or if they're locked into a hard deadline. This simple question demonstrates a massive amount of emotional intelligence and professional respect. Human beings operate in distinct time zones of mental availability. If they are currently managing a production emergency or trying to clear a bottleneck before a major client meeting, their brain is in a state of high anxiety. If you force your agenda on them during that window, they will view your presentation as an annoying distraction. By giving them a clear, pressure-free opportunity to reschedule if they are currently in a high-stress zone, you build an immediate foundation of trust that ensures they will be fully present and receptive when the conversation actually occurs. The exact same principles of tactical awareness govern your behavior when you are physically navigating a professional event, an industry conference, or an end-of-quarter office celebration. Most people attend networking events with a completely backward operational strategy. They arrive starving, immediately head straight for the buffet table, load up a plate with finger foods, and grab a drink. Then they spend the rest of the evening standing awkwardly in a corner, desperately trying to balance a plate, a fork, and a cocktail glass, while hoping that someone interesting will approach them. This is a complete disaster for your social capital. No high-value operator wants to initiate a professional connection with someone whose hands are covered in grease and who is actively masticating a slider. You must permanently separate your eating schedule from your networking schedule. Eat a full meal before you ever arrive at the venue. When you cross the threshold of the event, your hands must be entirely free, your mouth must be clear, and your physical frame must be completely unburdened. You are not there to consume free catering. You are there to map the room and execute a strategic networking agenda. The moment you walk through the doors of that event space, do not immediately rush toward the bar or run to find someone you already know. execute an entrance pause. Stop right inside the doorway for 5 to 10 seconds. Hold your head high, maintain an open, stable posture, and let your eyes slowly scan the geography of the room. Look at the various clusters of people. Track where the main decision makers are congregating and assess the overall energy of the different groups. This deliberate pause serves a dual purpose. First, it allows your own nervous system to adjust to the sensory inputs of the room, preventing that initial wave of social anxiety that causes people to rush blindly into the crowd. Second, it presents an image of immense self-assurance to everyone else in the room. You look like a host who is calmly surveying their domain rather than a desperate guest who is looking for a social life jacket to cling to. When you identify an individual or a group that you want to integrate with, do not stand on the periphery waiting for an explicit invitation that will never come. High-status operators make the first move. They understand that the vast majority of people at corporate events are deeply insecure and secretly hoping that someone else will take the initiative to start the interaction. Walk directly toward your target cluster with a measured, intentional stride. When you reach the group, look for a natural opening in their physical circle. Step in with an open posture, make brief eye contact with the primary speaker, and listen closely to the dialogue for a minute. The moment a natural pause occurs, execute a confident, low-friction entry phrase. Do not interrupt their narrative. Build directly on top of their current topic by validating their point and introducing your own perspective. You are adding new energy to the group dynamic, which makes you a highly welcome addition to the conversation. As the interaction progresses, you must keep a hyper-vigilant track of your counterpart's micro-expressions and physical cues to ensure you exit the dialogue long before your presence becomes an administrative burden. The absolute worst thing you can do at a professional gathering is to overstay your welcome and become the person that someone is desperately trying to escape from. Pay close attention to their structural alignment. If their head is turned toward you, but their toes are pointed toward the exit, or if they are constantly shifting their weight from side to side, breaking eye contact to glance around the room, or checking their phone, their brain has already checked out of the conversation. Do not double down and try to win them back with another long story. Execute an immediate, high-class exit strategy. Cut your own narrative short. Give them a clean, effortless out by stating that you want to let them circulate and connect with the rest of the team. Exchange contact details and walk away smoothly. By exiting the conversation while the energy is still relatively stable, you leave a professional impression that ensures they will be highly receptive when you follow up via email or Slack the following morning. To fully transition into the top tier of high-performance communicators, you must learn how to handle the inevitable awkward moments, public slip-ups, and corporate mistakes that occur daily in any high-pressure environment. Social elegance is defined entirely by how you behave when the system breaks down. Imagine sitting in an executive review meeting. A colleague who is presenting a slide deck suddenly experiences a complete mental freeze, forgets a crucial data point, or accidentally knocks over their mug of coffee right onto the boardroom table. The standard, low-status human reflex is either to gasp, make a sharp joke at their expense to alleviate the tension, or offer an exaggerated, frantic display of assistance that only serves to amplify their public humiliation. A master of behavioral engineering handles these scenarios with complete social grace. You do absolutely nothing. You do not react, you do not comment, and you do not let your facial expressions change. You treat the error as if it were completely invisible. If coffee is spilling, you calmly pass them a napkin under the table while continuing to look at the presentation screen, keeping the focus entirely on the agenda. By allowing the other person to completely save face in a moment of vulnerability, you build a level of professional loyalty that cannot be bought with any amount of financial currency. They will subconsciously view you as a source of absolute safety, structural stability, and immense personal dignity. This exact same commitment to maintaining group momentum applies when a high-value storyteller is rudely interrupted or sidetracked during a conversation. Imagine a team dinner where a lead engineer is actively explaining the exact technical breakthrough that allowed them to salvage a broken software deployment. Right before they hit the punchline of their narrative, a server walks up to the table to take drink orders, or a latecomer arrives and completely disrupts the flow of the table. Once the administrative interruption clears, the vast majority of people will completely forget about the engineer's story and shift their attention to the new variable. The engineer is left sitting in silence, their social momentum entirely destroyed. This is your moment to step in and execute a tactical spotlight redirect. Look directly back at the engineer, use their name, and state that you want to hear exactly what happened after the team rolled back the server deployment. This simple gesture has a massive psychological impact. You are communicating to that individual that their input is highly valuable to you and that you possess the focus required to track their narrative across external distractions. You are single-handedly restoring their social status in front of the entire group, and they will respect you immensely for the intervention. When your daily professional execution requires you to make a direct ask for someone's time, resources, or specialized assistance, you must strip away all traces of altruistic illusion and ground your approach entirely in mutual incentive. Human beings are biological algorithms that are constantly running an internal calculation. What is the explicit return on investment for my attention? When you approach an executive for a mentorship coffee or ask a cross-functional partner to expedite a project ticket for your team, never frame the request around your own personal needs. Do not say things like, "I really need this favor because my team is behind schedule." That phrasing signals dependency, poor planning, and low status. Instead, you must pre-frame your request by highlighting the exact value proposition for their world. Show them how your assistance directly aligns with their strategic goals, elevates their visibility in front of leadership, or optimizes their own long-term workflow. If you are asking an executive for advice, tell them that their specific framework for scaling operations is something you want to pilot in your department, and that you will provide them with a full data report on the operational results that they can leverage for their own quarterly reviews. You must make the exchange an undeniable win for their career track before you ever ask them to allocate a single minute of their schedule to your agenda. If they do agree to assist you or execute a major professional favor for your business, you must deliberately manage the emotional timeline of that transaction. The typical amateur communicator experiences an immediate relief when someone says yes to a request, and they immediately try to execute the favor or collect the asset within the next 5 minutes. This rapid transactional pace completely ruins the psychological satisfaction of giving. It makes the interaction feel like an administrative task or an automated exchange rather than an act of mutual alignment. A master of behavioral engineering understands that a significant portion of the psychological currency generated by doing a favor is experienced during the anticipation phase. Once an individual agrees to help you, pause. Give them a deliberate window of 24 to 48 hours before you send over the final files or set up the calendar invite. This intentional delay allows them to spend a full day feeling highly competent, generous, and influential within the organization. It transforms the favor from a draining chore into a positive validation of their internal identity, ensuring that they will execute the task with a much higher level of care and goodwill.
Once the favor has been successfully completed, you must resist the primitive urge to immediately repay the debt with an equivalent gesture. Running a rapid payback sequence, such as immediately Venmoing someone or buying them an expensive gift card the exact same afternoon they helped you solve a coding bug, is a massive strategic error. It communicates to their subconscious that you are deeply uncomfortable holding a position of social obligation. It signals that you view the relationship as a strict transaction where debts must be settled immediately to prevent any deep connection from forming. It essentially cheapens their generosity by treating it as a commercial service. Instead, receive their assistance with absolute grace, offer an authentic expression of specific gratitude, and let the obligation sit unresolved for a month or two.
Let the relationship breathe. Then, down the line, when they least expect it, identify a highly strategic opportunity to return the value tenfold, such as introducing them to a key client, backing up their proposal during a highly contested leadership meeting, or passing them a highly valuable professional lead. This delayed reciprocity builds genuine long-term professional capital. It transforms a series of isolated workplace interactions into a powerful, unbreakable strategic alliance. To maintain these alliances over a multi-year career, you must establish an absolute boundary that isolates your serious professional conflicts and operational debates from your social environments. There is a strict time and place for intense negotiation, technical disagreement, and systemic critique. That place is a scheduled calendar invite or a dedicated corporate review session. It is absolutely never a casual lunch table, a holiday party, or a celebration dinner. When you sit down to break bread with colleagues, clients, or cross-functional partners, you are participating in an ancient behavioral ritual designed to establish psychological safety and tribal alignment. If you use that window to bring up an unresolved grievance about a missed deadline or to critique a design choice, you are committing a catastrophic social error. You are violating the safe haven of the group dynamic. The other people at the table will instantly freeze up, their cortisol levels will spike, and they will associate your presence with absolute discomfort. No matter how urgent your professional grievance is, keep it completely locked away during social interactions. Smile, discuss high-level concepts, share strategic goals, and maintain an impeccable level of positive energy. Save the hard operational alignment for Monday morning at 9 a.m. on Slack, where it belongs. When an operational failure does occur on your watch, such as missing an important Zoom sync with an enterprise client or completely mismanaging a product release timeline, you must completely abandon the standard corporate apology script. Saying, "sorry for the inconvenience," is a completely dead phrase that carries zero professional weight. It signals that you are simply running a default compliance macro to protect yourself from consequences. If you want to transform an operational mistake into a massive win for your professional reputation, your response must be aggressively proactive and heavily focused on system optimization. First, state the failure with absolute, unadorned clarity. Do not offer defensive excuses about your internet connection or team capacity. Second, outline the exact structural adjustments you have already implemented to guarantee that the specific failure mode can never repeat within your workflow. Third, deliver an immediate, unexpected value injection to compensate for their lost time. If you missed a strategy call, send them a highly detailed 10-page competitive analysis report that your team spent the entire weekend building specifically for their market niche. When a client or executive realizes that an error on your part results in them receiving a massive surge of high-value assets and a permanent upgrade to the operational framework, their psychological response shifts entirely. They stop fearing your mistakes. They actively begin to value your radical commitment to systemic excellence. As you navigate these complex operational systems, you must remain acutely aware of the invisible behavioral ledger that tracks your real-time social value score within your organization or industry. Life is not a level playing field governed by pure meritocracy. It is a continuous, highly competitive game where every single word, gesture, pause, and email response continuously updates your relative position on the invisible social ladder. Look closely at the structural dynamics of any high-level executive meeting. Notice how one individual can pitch a highly controversial, disruptive idea, and the entire room immediately shifts their stance to align with the proposal, while another individual can present a perfectly safe, data-driven update and get immediately interrupted, picked apart, and dismissed by the leadership team. This is not a random occurrence. This is the invisible scoreboard at work. The first individual has spent years systematically eliminating low-value social noise from their behavioral algorithm, while the second individual has continuously drained their own capital through 1,000 minor compliance errors. If you want to raise your score permanently and command complete authority in every room you walk into, you must commit to a radical micro-challenge over the next 14 days. Treat yourself strictly as a complex biological system governed by precise operational scripts. For the next 2 weeks, permanently eliminate all subconscious fidgeting, face-touching, and nervous verbal filler from your professional communication. When you enter a workspace, execute the 3-point somatic reset at every single doorway. When you are asked what you do for a living, refuse to drop a generic job title and articulate your precise value proposition instead. When someone is speaking to you, give them your undivided, focused presence, and let your smile arrive with a deliberate, controlled delay that proves it is earned. Stop leaving your professional connections to random luck or emotional whim. Run the behavioral algorithms with absolute structural precision. Track the data patterns in your environment and watch how quickly the room adjusts to your rhythm.